Hello and welcome to Voices of the Industry, a podcast series bringing you leading industry voices who challenge thinking across transportation, infrastructure and cities. With the net zero deadline of 2050 drawing nearer and the two-thirds emission reduction target for 2030 for developed nations even closer, all minds need to be focused on the fastest way to decarbonise our communities and economy. In the UK, attention has lately turned to the value of localised decarbonisation solutions that recognise the complex and unique ways that our nation's different villages, towns and cities function. Local area energy plans, or LAEPs, represent a move to climate solutions under the influence and control of local authorities, who are recognised as exercising control in 45 key climate policy areas. Commercialising net zero projects can be key to their success, and private sector funding can help to unlock wider city decarbonisation. Attracting investment will be a crucial strand of discussion at Steer and Amberside Advisors' joint event, Unlocking City Decarbonisation, on May 22nd, the latest in our series, The Rethink Rooms. With us today to discuss the topic ahead of our event is Peter Gudde, Net Zero Programme Lead at the Greater South East Net Zero Hub. Peter has extensive experience in local government with previous roles on Forest Heath District Council and St Edmundsbury Borough Council, as well as working as a PhD researcher at the Universities of Suffolk and East Anglia in smart energy systems. Hi Peter, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks ever so much for inviting me along, Tim.
No worries. I thought as a little opener, why don't you tell us a couple of sentences about your PhD research?
Oh, that's really interesting. Thanks for picking that one up. Yeah, I'm looking at local governance, particularly around climate emergencies, and thinking around how local areas and the local authorities can engage better around net zero. Now, the big challenge is that local authorities are diverse and across the UK, and a lot of the research is focused on the metropolitan areas. And I know this call is around cities. We've got to take account of the rural areas as well. And so my area of focus is trying to help the local authorities that are probably less well resourced navigate the net zero landscape and work with others collaboratively. So in a nutshell, that's what I'm trying to achieve. Hopefully it'll be of some success and some use at the end of the process.
That was good. Glad to hear that someone's on the case. Also with me is Amberside Advisors Shivali Marta. Shivali has been at Amberside Advisors since the end of last year and joined from the Project Management Office of the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, or DESNZ. Shivali has extensive experience in the global energy market, spanning heat decarbonisation, carbon management, energy efficiency, sustainability strategies, and renewable technologies. She has a strong background in leading strategy development, policy delivery, and programme management, and will be hosting our panel of experts at Unlocking City Decarbonisation. Welcome, Shivali. I wonder if you could tell us a really important lesson that you took from working at DESNZ that you've brought to Amberside with you.
Hi, Tim. Thank you. Thank you for the welcome. Collaboration. So one thing where in our Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, we believe in is working collaboratively, internally, externally. And that's one thing which I've brought together in Amberside, working with Steer. And it's beautiful to work collaboratively with not only Amberside colleagues, but also bring in the expertise from Steer. So I'm almost working multi-vector internally, from transport consultants to specialism on commercial and financial side in energy. So collaboration would be my takeaway.
That was perfect. Thank you. Shivali, why don't you take it away?
So welcome, Peter. Thank you for your time. You've been at the Greater South East Net Zero Hub for 5 years. Can you please explain the role of a Net Zero Hub and how this relates to accelerating the commercialization of net zero projects in the public sector?
Great. Thanks for asking that question, Shivali. And as the intro said, I'm program lead for Net Zero, and there are 5 Net Zero hubs across England. And we were set up in 2018 by central government as a way of joining up the dots between national clean growth ambitions and local policy and delivery to achieve the energy transition. So the challenge was at the time there was a gap between current, at the time, government policy around decarbonisation and growth and what was happening on the ground. And we were there to, in effect, fill the gap and try and help coordinate some of that. So we're a free resource available to the local areas, working particularly with the public sector on the ground to deliver net zero initiatives across all typologies: power generation, building decarbonisation, mobility. Now, the advantage that this program has, it's locally focused and it's delivered locally as well, as opposed to essentially delivered model. So we've got a very diverse client base in the southeast. We work with 146 county, district and unitary councils, as well as the health sector, university and education. But we also work with private and community energy sectors, and we'll touch on that a little bit in the podcast, I hope, whether that's on local industrial decarbonisation programs or community energy funding support. So finally, we get involved in, and it's not a small issue, it's a massive one for the UK, is around delivering domestic energy retrofit. And part of our role is to help local authorities navigate the grant schemes that are available, and also to see how that can unlock local investment, build supply chains and training networks to increase the supply side for net zero solutions. So my team focus particularly on helping our clients achieve investment-ready net zero projects and programs. And we work with clients at any stage in the project development, whether that's providing a range of support activities to accelerate their projects from concept to delivery through the investment business case. A lot of projects at the moment are supported by grant aid, and so we're trying to help our local authorities not only navigate the state funding, but also the non-state funding that could be available to help them blend finance between what's available nationally through national programs and what's available from other sources. And we have a client-led project investment pipeline of around 100 projects worth about 1.1 billion currently on our books across heat, energy generation, storage, transport decarbonisation, as I indicated. And around £50 million of private finance has been brought into the projects that have been delivered today. The challenge is that these are single projects, and the move into programs and systemic change is the critical thing. And how do we then see how the money can flow into these projects? So we're keen to see how individual projects can be built into programs, how local authorities and other partners can work together to unlock some of the investment opportunities. And the landscape's changed over the last 5 years, I would suggest, since we were set up. Back in 2018, it was an 80% national target obligated under the Climate Change Act. Now it's net zero by 2050. And we've also seen a local push by local authorities and councils up and down the UK towards earlier target setting through their climate emergency declarations, which was politically and locally driven as opposed to national. And we've seen that now as a net zero target for the UK, but earlier dates set by the local authorities. But for most councils, the challenge is how do they best operate in an environment that is, given that they're politically democratic organisations with systems and processes, how do they navigate what is relatively new to them, the energy system, and relatively new to them, the investment markets and other forms of investment. And so it is challenging for local authorities, and I think we'll come on to that in the podcast.
Thank you, Peter. I think you touched on private finance and also the pipeline of projects you have, the local push. So just expanding on that, in terms of unlocking this wider decarbonisation in UK in terms of urban centres, but also rural communities, what role do you think does private finance / community investment has to play in this area?
Well, ultimately, we're not going to deliver net zero without all the money that needs to be available brought to the table. And currently, the way that we approach this is through the tax base and utilising state funding. There's a lot of money flowing in other places, but it's not marshalled. And the challenge comes that we need to be able to bring all the opportunities that different sources of funding and finance bring to the table for different types of projects in a way that is easy to apply and easy to flow. So the money flows into the projects and the projects become successful. So it's really important that we're able to understand what's available in the marketplace and also what could be funding that could be raised locally, for example. So there are a range of opportunities that could be brought together, and thinking around how that would then work with state derived funding is a real opportunity for local areas. The challenge is that we haven't had a track record in the last 20 years of doing this for this sort of area of work. So we look forward to seeing how some of the examples that we're going to talk about today can enable that.
Thank you. And as you said, the landscape has changed in the last 5 years, and particularly last couple of years, I would say, following COVID as well. And turning into your extensive experience in local government, what do you think are some specific challenges which are faced by local authorities in financing these net zero projects?
So some of the challenges are specific to the public sector and some are sort of common across the energy transition. It doesn't matter what organisation or institution you are, some of them are common, and we'll touch on that. But the public sector has to think and act in a more commercial way in order for it to sustain the amount of money that keeps really important services being delivered. I mean, the challenge for local authorities is that they're trying to deliver a multitude of services, and moving through the energy transition is just one of them. But it's not mandated. A lot of the services are statutory and need to be delivered, and particularly in a financially constrained environment, that becomes challenging to say, well, should we put our money here or put our money there? The nature of the decision-making processes in local authorities are both complex to navigate and cyclical, if you think about political cycles as well. But that's for very good reasons, since they're spending taxpayers' money. So there has to be a high level of probity and due diligence within the decisions they take around where they get money from and how they utilise it. So it's really important for them to be able to meet responsibilities and spend taxpayers' money wisely, but also trying to navigate the commerciality of the energy system and the way that potentially funds could come into that. So those are some of the specific challenges. And to overlay that, there's an in-house capacity and capability challenge, particularly at the moment, as we're seeing some local authorities struggle to meet the balancing of books because of the impact of COVID and the global recession that we went through in the last couple of years. And we're seeing a lot of churn at the moment of staff due to the financial state of some of the local authorities. Some of those staff are involved in delivering some of the programs. So that makes for quite a technical, quite a challenging environment for local authorities. Overlay that with the more general challenges around system transition, particularly around the energy network. Nearly every project that we get involved with has to connect a cable to the energy network, to the power network, or put a pipe in the ground. And that requires negotiation and agreement with the local network operators. And the way that the investment of the infrastructure occurs sometimes, and not in many cases, and not in all cases, but sometimes does bind and slow down and hinder the process of projects moving forward. And that is something local authorities not tended to be used to. They haven't had to navigate the energy system in such a detailed way for their projects in the past. It's usually a case that they connect for demand only, and now they have to think about demand and supply. So those challenges, alongside supply chain challenges, are ones that local authorities have to take on board and try and to understand in order to bring their projects forward.
That sounds really interesting. There's obviously a lot of change going on. I wonder if you could give us a bit more detail, Peter, about the kinds of stakeholders that local authorities are bringing together in this process.
I mean, thanks for asking that question, because that's really important, that this is not just about technology, it's about people. And we are looking at a fundamental change to society, which is about people. It's about how we use energy and how we live our lives. So within the projects that we're seeing working with our public sector clients, we deal with all parts of society, and those are potentially stakeholders in any of the projects that our clients are taking forward. Probably starting point is the local authorities themselves and their internal stakeholders, whether it's a finance officer, whether it's a manager who's dealing with property or assets. There are internal relationships that need to be managed, and we work and help local authorities to navigate those relationships and build strong teams. We also work to bring local authorities in areas together. They may have worked before on different issues. There are opportunities for them to work in the future around procurement, around the cost of capital, around the delivery of projects. So we try and bring local authorities together to aggregate up and create scale that may be more attractive for the investment market. And for comfort as well, working together in terms of solidarity and collaboration is a really important issue here, because the energy system doesn't recognise the administrative boundaries of the local authorities. It's a different administrative and geographical area. So we do need to think across boundary here, both in terms of technology type, but also how stakeholders work together. And the energy system is no different there.
That's certainly sounds complicated. How, as a hub, do you manage that network of people?
Okay, we work in several ways, both on a specific project basis. So we'll work with a client who's got a stakeholder a range of stakeholders that they need to work with. And so we might help them with mapping out who those stakeholders are, thinking what sort of relationships they need to build, how they'll work with those. We also work externally from the project, working with some of the system actors, the network operators, for example, in a more tactical and strategic way, thinking around how can we influence in a positive way change by sharing knowledge that we've gathered by dealing and working with our clients, but also as being part of one of the government's departments, we have the ability to interact and share knowledge around delivery, and where that may not be so successful, how can we help that delivery improve? And working with the network operators who have their own investment plans, they may not have so much visibility of what's happening on the ground. And so we can help them gain visibility of what the anticipated level of change and activity is in a local area. And that's going to become much more of a way forward, thinking around mapping and modelling the local area in order to come up with the best solutions so that investment ahead of need becomes a thing, as opposed to investment just in time, which is a traditional or conventional way that these issues of network development are approached.
That's interesting. So, kind of building on that, you just mentioned sort of knowledge sharing and mapping. I assume that you're building a best practice the whole time. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because this is kind of at the moment an unknown quantity.
And that's really important, that our role is not just around helping individual projects, it's about sharing knowledge, accelerating good quality practices, and reducing the cost and the time spent and the effort spent trying to get the projects away. So, our role is hopefully valuable in terms of sharing knowledge across domains, whether it's around certain technology types between our clients and beyond our clients, because we're one of 5 hubs across England. So we do share knowledge not just within a specific locality of where we are working, which is the southeast, but we'll go beyond the southeast into other areas of England and the UK to share best practice. We're utilising various tools to do that, and one of them is a platform called Net Zero Go, which is a local authority-facing tool funded by central government. In effect, it's your all-in-one place to go as a local authority for information, for guidance, for access to template documents, for forums to be able to share knowledge between peers. And that's really important to learn off others and to also share your knowledge with others. So we're very keen to see how we can help local authorities share best practice and also get behind the standard case study, which tends to be a little bit more positive. And you want to know, where did it go wrong? How can I improve on what experience, if it was a bad one, for example, how can I avoid that in my project? So that's really important that we share that knowledge. We also get involved in research and development. So although it's not our key role, we do see there are places where we can fill a gap in terms of putting some time and effort into thinking about things. Can we improve the way feasibility studies are done, for example, for car parking, places like that, where you might be thinking as a local authority around putting solar canopies in, batteries in, EV charging for the future. So we're developing tools and techniques to help local authorities access better knowledge, model better, design better, think around the tools that are outside in the marketplace that they could utilize and purchase themselves in an effective way, so that both data and tools become available to them in ways that they haven't had the opportunity to use in the past.
Cool. And then, since you just mentioned case studies, I wonder if you are able to give us any sort of more concrete examples.
Yes, I mean, we worked with and helped local authorities, West Berkshire, West Oxfordshire, county councils in Essex, Suffolk, Norfolk, Cambridgeshire, look at solar, look at heat networks, things like that. Also, we've helped, for example, electrify the bus service in Cambridgeshire through a grant called Zebra. We helped the local authority and the bus company to design in and procure the buses in that area and put the infrastructure in to help charge those buses. Those are the sort of things we get involved in. The challenge comes, though, that a lot of the local projects that come forward are early stage. So we see projects at the early stage, we help the client, and then possibly they don't come back to us. We hope they've been successful and we've been helpful for them to move forward. We look forward to engaging with our clients when they delivered their projects and celebrating their success. But I think it tends to be, Tim, quite a treadmill. I think the next project comes along and people tend to forget about celebrating the good stuff. And that's, I think, one of our roles is to build some case studies as well. So we do have case studies on our website and through Net Zero Go to help local authorities see what they could achieve, and also to find out who has been involved in those projects so they can talk to them directly.
That's great. And hopefully we're helping you celebrate a little bit today by asking you about them. Circling back to the question about funding, is this a completely new funding environment, and how is it different or similar to previous infrastructure and planning funding?
I think if we just take a step back and we think around what we've got to achieve here, I mean, decarbonisation and climate change is such a massive, wicked problem. We need to think around how we as a society can fund this, but we don't think around this as we don't think about this as a pure cost. And so one of the challenges is trying to convert a very monetized return on investment environment to one that values the wider benefits. I mean, research evidence shows that for every pound spent, £6 of damage is avoided globally in terms of the impact of climate change and global warming. So we don't cost that into our models. So when we start to think around where the money is going to come from and how we build our business cases, we probably need to be a bit smarter, a bit more open about what is the collateral impact and the positive benefits of investing in, say, domestic retrofit, which is a long burn, energy efficiency, low return for an individual investor. But the collateral benefits are significant, whether it's around improving the health outcomes, educational outcomes, improving air quality and the like, if you're looking at transportation, for example. So thinking around some of those new sources of money, we're working on a project that is funded by the Department for Net Zero called the Local Net Zero Accelerator. Now, this is a £19 million project or programme of work with 3 combined authorities, one in the West Midlands, one in Greater Manchester, and the newly formed York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, looking at new forms of area-based investment model, trying to bring in different sources of investment, not just state funding, but also other forms of institutional investment, potentially crowdfunding investment, locally raised money, in order to undertake programs that are cross-area as opposed to individual asset. When I say an individual asset, I'm thinking around rooftop solar or a heat pump. Those are sort of single asset classes. But when you take those in the round and you think around the money that could come into addressing those, there are potential opportunities to blend the finance and get a range of returns plus the co-benefits. And that's an area that we're really keen to see how that plays out. That project's just starting and it's a 2-year program. So we're hopefully going to see the value of testing things out in those areas. An example will be the Bristol City Leap model, where we see a partnership between Bristol City Council, Amoresco and Vattenfall, a long-term private-public partnership that allows money to flow from the private sector on a values basis into local area decarbonisation. So it's really important to test that sort of model, but there are other models available. We need to think around how these other models could be applied, and are they appropriate for a rural area compared to a city area? It may be that they're not. So we need to think and test, but we need to move quickly as well, Tim. That's the key thing.
Shivali, Peter just mentioned community finance and also rural models versus city models. Did you want to pick up a few questions on that?
Thank you, Tim. Peter, just summarizing a little bit on and probably replaying some themes you talked about, local authorities, and I can completely relate to them, the multitude of services they have to offer, the complexities, not only in the energy system, but then transport, the adult care, social care, issues even starting from potholes to highways. So there is a plethora of systemic and issues, to be honest, they look at. And the role of Hub, you mentioned about knowledge sharing, tools, data, a lot of support that you are providing to local authorities is invaluable in my mind, both from, I think Tim mentioned about the urban centres and also the rural communities. And reflecting on these two, do you think there is a role, and you mentioned about the funding as well, that we need to go for innovative funding models from city deals to localised rural small areas? Do we see a role for social value investments playing in funding this net zero? So in the end, we all want happy communities. Can we create that investment role and bake in social value in those investments?
That's a really, really important point, that we tend to think traditionally around investment and investment into projects and activities as measured by their financial return, internal rate of return, net present value, payback, whatever the metric that we use. And investment markets are probably driven by those quite conventional metrics, although we are seeing change in the marketplace, although relatively small. It's important when you're dealing with the local authorities in the public sector that their purpose is about well-being and about supporting the locality across a whole range of issues, and they deal with market failure. So there's a real challenge there, that you're dealing with two very different audiences, two different ways of thinking around an issue when we're trying to deliver a single type of project. So we're seeing the investor market at one end, we're seeing the local authority at the other, and arguably you've got the energy system, energy actors in there as well, all talking different languages, all having different ways of measuring stuff. But we need to come to some common ground as to be able to let the money flow through to these projects. So there's, for the local authorities, there are a lot of value streams that are not monetized, to use that phrase. And sometimes that's a difficult phrase to swallow when you're dealing with well-being, that we monetize stuff. But in order to make the money flow, we need to convince an investor that there's something, a good proposition here. So for the purposes, we'll use that term. And when you think about housing retrofit, for example, there's strong evidence that more energy efficient homes, as I've alluded to before, reduce household debt, improve health incomes, educational attainment, can add value to the property. Now, how do you build that into a business case and then convince an investor that's the right thing to do? So those social values and those value streams are really important when we think about building a business case in the public sector. There are some investors, and for example, pension schemes have to allocate a certain amount of money to environmental social goals. We need to move more in that direction and think around how we can build those into both the upstream, the upstream investor approach, and the downstream into the local authority and the public sector business case development, so that we have a common set of language and we have a common set of measurement of the performance of those projects. So when the money does go into a project, it delivers better homes, it delivers more comfortable living, lowering the cost of household bills, meaning people don't have to worry about heating, they can eat properly. That means educational attainment in the young, improvements means health for the those with COPD, potentially stops bed blocking because householders going back in and out in the wintertime from their homes because they're ill back into the NHS. So there are things like the way that we value projects that's really important. And there's also thinking around how the investor market treats that in their approach to long-sighted capital, I think we could use the phrase. Capital that actually works not just in the short term, but works for the long-term benefit.
That's really interesting. And I'm thinking about a project that we've done at Steer actually, which was about woodland management and how we developed metrics for measuring the well-being benefits of putting woodlands into community hands. It was a really interesting one. But what you were just saying sort of, I guess, requires a certain level of whole system thinking. And I wonder, does the Net Zero Hub act as a way of kind of bringing those different non-monetized factors together under one roof?
I think you've hit a really good important point there, Tim, that we've tended to traditionally think about a project, a single asset class. Let's build a solar farm, for example. Let's put a heat pump into a home. Let's put EV charging onto the street or whatever. When you take a place-based approach, you need to think differently. So conventionally, we have a series of silos, a series of lines coming down of funding for an asset class. We now need to think laterally across an area. And that's where area-based decarbonisation, pathway thinking, whole systems thinking, we talk about local area energy planning, that modelling of a locality to then be able to build up a picture based on a future scenario or set of scenarios of change that will allow investment into technologies and techniques and practices to decarbonise the locality in a fair and just way as well. We do need to think around that rather than thinking around it just about a techno fix. So that's where the local authorities probably have as much opportunity and responsibility to play, to take their role in, whether it's a convening role or that it's actively engaging and taking forward local area energy planning or decarbonisation pathways on a spatial basis and a temporal basis. It's really important. Because once you have that and you've mapped your area, you understand it, you can then talk to investors, you can then talk to the system operators, you can talk to the network operators and say, this is what we need in the future, folks. This is what we need in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. okay, it may shift a little bit. But in the absence of that, we are investing in a semi-dumb system. We don't really know what's going to be coming onto the system. And that's challenging for the network operators who have to agree their investment plans with Ofgem. And that cost that they're investing in ultimately comes onto our energy bills. So we need to think in a whole systems way. That could bring in, for example, thinking about the water energy waste nexus. How do we bring those things together? Currently, we don't do that so well in the UK, and maybe that's the thing that we need to bring forward in some of the thinking. But the starting point is around modelling your area and building clear understanding of what's needed and building investment plans off that so you can then talk to investors in a more meaningful way.
That's great. And I know that kind of modelling the area really feeds into what we'll be talking about soon.
Peter, just moving into a little bit of the area of community energy investments and community energy champions locally, and probably not going into details, but taking an example of a successful project. From community perspective, Swaffham Prior district heating project, a lot of value in bringing communities on board with us when we are delivering the projects. And I think more valuable if communities are investing and getting the return from those investments. What are your views on community energy projects being led by champions and working possibly with the stakeholder, as you mentioned, DNOs, or the future FSO, the future system planner operator?
I think it is the way forward for certain areas. I mean, we have to think around how we bring those projects forward, and the challenge for community groups is navigating what is a complex system. So that need still needs to be fulfilled, and I think helping those embryonic groups or those groups that are quite mature to move to their next project is really important. The ability to get a vested interest, positive vested interest into the local area is a really valid, important piece as well, that how the individual residents understand the reason for change, because there's a lot of barriers to change. Why would you want to move from one system of heating your home to another if you can't see the short-term benefit? Selling those benefits in the long term and understanding, well, this will make a difference somewhere down the line because I'm involved in this as a collective is a really, really important thing. How to bring that forward? There are a range of actors that are involved, local authorities, and we get involved through the Community Energy Fund, which is a stimulus package to early feasibility of projects for community energy groups. There's a long way to go, and we were really keen to support community energy because we cannot rely on a top-down national system only. We need to have a multitude of directions within this long-term system change, and we need people vested in that, and we need to take those that can't invest with us as well. The challenge is that you'll end up in a place where you don't have parts of society engaged in the sorts of changes that are likely to be needed. So we do need to understand how those that can't invest can take benefit from system change as well and make their lives better. So the value of having people on the ground, the local activist, positive activist for this sort of thing is really critical, and unleashing potentially latent local funds, for example, through crowdfunding. We've seen that with solar farm build out in Wiltshire, for example. We've seen that up in Warrington, where community municipal bonds have been a successful way of raising money for certain types of renewable and energy efficiency programs. These are ways to unlock potentially latent local capital that is then invested into the local area, potentially creating jobs, creating opportunities for people to benefit from the returns on investment from the projects, as well as seeing something that has a longer term goal, a longer term ambition, which hopefully will be attractive to a local area.
You mentioned about Bristol City Leap earlier, and we also saw the example of Coventry following in a different model. And as you said, different models fit at different areas. What are your thoughts on unlocking city-level decarbonisation, possibly with models like Bristol City Leap versus rural decarbonisation, where different models and possibly social value investment brings a higher value? But how do we bring pace, and we've talked about pace quite a lot, in delivering these together from Hub's perspective, and then move on to local authorities to bridge the gap of capability, capacity, if where we can, possibly PPPs, the public-private partnerships? So
there's a real place for cities to work in a unified way. We're seeing that with the combined authorities in the West Midlands, Greater Manchester, in terms of the both the leadership role and the ability to corral and bring forward coherent programs of work, Greater London Authority as well. So that gives scale. I mean, the one advantage of scale is you can get capital cheaper. And so in urban areas where you've got a high density of heat and energy use, you can probably find it easier to access capital in because of the sheer scale of the projects and the nature of the changes that are going on. So there's real value for those public-private partnerships and for collaborations, certainly in cities, to be able to do that. I would say there's equally value to local areas in the rural, semi-rural, outside the major conurbations, where you have potentially single mayoral authority type models. Outside of those, there's real value to working together for resilience as much as anything else. We work with, as I say, 140 or so local authorities, all very different. And the challenge comes for some of the rural local authorities. They may have one champion, one person working on a program of decarbonisation of climate change. And they may also be doing another job as well, part-time energy or fuel poverty. So to be able to work with your peers and then to build up collaborations and scale is really important, and it may not be the sort of public-private partnership model that works so well in that area. It may be a local delivery model that could utilise local structures and maybe working together as local authorities, but working with other local partners. But, there are models out there that we want to see tested more and to see replicated. And I think through the local net zero accelerator, certainly we'll learn things not just for the urban areas, but for the rural areas. For example, the building of supply chains and increasing the skill set of the local jobs market. How can we improve accessibility for people coming into the sector and increase the opportunity, which is another value stream that we should be building into our projects. So these things will probably need to be tailored to the local area, but we do need models, replicable models that will work in certain typical similar environments, whether it's semi-urban, urban, and rural. And we look forward to seeing how the local net zero accelerator brings forward a couple of those models.
So we've covered a lot of ground there, and I'm very grateful to Peter and Shivali. I wonder, just to round off, Peter, maybe you could tell us something really good that's happening right now in the net zero space and something that you would really want to happen in the future.
Wow, that's a good one. We always think about the challenges, so let's think about some of the real positives. I've been really pleased to see, for example, Braintree Council secured money to decarbonise one of their leisure centres, build solar canopies. Very practical, local project. At a larger scale, I'm pleased to be supporting the knowledge sharing through the Net Zero Go platform. We manage the contract in the southeast. We want as many local authorities to use that as possible, because the more we use our collective knowledge and share our collective knowledge, the better we will get, the faster we will get, the more efficient we will get, and we'll get better products, we'll get better outcomes. And, I'm really pleased that project is now embedded within a lot of the activity that we do, supporting our clients around knowledge sharing. So the Net Zero Code platform, I'm really proud to sort of encourage local authorities to use.
And one for the future?
One for the future, I think collaborations and building portfolios of activity across a local area. We talk about local area energy planning. I think more around a bit techie, but spatial decarbonisation pathways, because it's not just about energy, it's about other things as well. So getting to know your area and being able to model it and then develop an investment portfolio and an investment prospectus, I think is really exciting. We're doing some projects around that for industrial estates, thinking around you could develop an investment prospectus where the landlord and the tenants and other landowners can collaborate as a local energy community. So I'm really excited about that sort of project, being able to follow through and get investment into it and to be replicated out to other industrial estates and business parks across the southeast. So that sort of thing, I'd love to see things happen. And I think those sorts of things will be great as exemplars and opportunities for translating ideas elsewhere.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Shivali, you're a woman on the inside of the energy industry. What's a current positive and one that you would want for the future?
This conversation, and thank you so much, Peter, and thanks for organising, Tim. This conversation has actually really filled me for more hope for future. generally there is that feeling, I feel, and you can see it in the market from finance side, the investors are quite keen to come into UK PLC, and local authorities or local sector and the hubs are, there is a whole mindset change on how do we work together, how do we work collectively, bring the pace, deliver the projects together, bring a healthy pipeline of not only high investable but high social value or low social value projects as well. There's a whole sense of bringing that happy communities, which I love, because that's where we are for. And for future, my comment will be, whether it be it organizational resilience or resilience at home, house level, in our personal lives, or resilience at a better, beautiful world, will need diversity. So we will need those diverse perspectives, diverse solutions, and that appetite is increasing day by day. It is, and that is beautiful to see. We're involving everyone, we're taking people on in the journey together, and that will bring resilience. So hopefully that is the feeling which the others will get as well.
That was great. Thank you. So yeah, thank you both. A really fascinating conversation. And thank you to everybody that's listening.